Conservative moral frame, metaphorically, the worst thing the strict father can do is betray the trust of the family.
Okay.
Have an affair, something like that.
But he's doing that right now. He's having an affair with the Republican.
Oh, well, that's,
chief.
well, but yeah, that if it were characterized that way, it would be very effective. Yeah, yeah. But the betrayal of trust is that he's betrayed the trust of the people, right? And then point out ways that he's done that. That's, for progressives, that's should have been the
Letter writing campaign. Walker has
I mean, look,
betrayed our trust.
what Mary Burke should have done, which was suggested to her campaign, was you should say that, yes, I'm a successful business person. We have this great company, and I recognize everything that the public and the people of Wisconsin have contributed to our success in our community, in our state, through your taxes, through public education, through et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if I'm elected governor, I'm going to make sure that I provide that Wisconsin continues to provide that opportunity and freedom for everyone. Basically acknowledging that private enterprise and success depends on the public. And that her family's company would not have prospered without it. That would have drawn a link between, that would have drawn a distinction between her and the conservative, and then she could have undermined Scott Walker with the betrayal of trust and said, he's done all these things to betray the trust of the people. He has cheated. I mean, you could be. I mean, more in terms of things that have electoral impact. You know, things like pandering to millionaires. That he doesn't millionaires. Geez, what century am I in?
Right.
You know, the idea that he doesn't represent people like you. You know, he's not like what Tammy did with Tommy Thompson.
What about the thing that made me crazy was Trek Bicycles donated bicycles and helmets and a curriculum to the Fort Atkinson School District. When we moved there in 2004, there wasn't a child in the community who was wearing a helmet. By the time we left in 2014, every one of the students had been through the middle school program, 3 years in gym class.
Mm-hmm.
They went out and rode bikes. They wore the helmets. All the kids in the community were now wearing helmets.
Mm-hmm.
That was in effect a Trek Bicycle.
I mean, that goes to empathy. That company is, you know, there are good, responsible companies out there. And what they could do is, you could say, look, you know, because we recognize that everyone working together in the state contributes to the profitability of our company, we're doing the responsible thing, and we're, you know, right, we're paying that forward.
Right.
You know, we are providing resources to the community through the profit that all of you helped us make. I mean, it's that kind of thing is exactly what should have been said. And there are people that say it, not enough, but. So Ron Johnson, right. I mean, Ron Johnson talking about being this great businessman and entrepreneur, you know, I go back to what I said earlier, saying something to him like, you know, Senator Johnson, yes, it's a very successful company, but where would you be without your community? Well, that would be, yes, that's perfect. No, that's perfect because in the conservative hierarchy, it's
right.
the men over women.
Right.
So that's perfect. So say, you know, your wife's family, you know, didn't you kind of ride the coattails of your wife? Well, I wouldn't, I mean,
You don't want to say father.
I mean, the wife thing is fine, but the other thing that's more important is that, you know, haven't the people of Oshkosh and Winnebago County and the state of Wisconsin done a lot for this company? Yeah. I mean, you certainly got tax breaks and incentives. You've certainly got publicly educated workers. It's plastics. They like plastic fabrication. The other thing is that this idea that the public is evil. I mean, again, talking about in terms of, look, we provided these things for you and your company. Why? Because we want to expand freedom for everyone, right? Not just you. It's not just you and the profits that you want, but it's for everyone. Again, the idea that the people that work for him, Senator Johnson, does anybody work for you that doesn't contribute to the profitability of your company? Ooh, I would love to ask him that question. Because his brain would just, he wouldn't want to answer yes, because he'd know it's a trap.
But to say no,
But if he says no, he's, right? What's he going to say?
Bunch of double talk.
Therefore, Senator Johnson, don't you have empathy for anyone? I mean, I would ask that question.
Senator Cruz,
Because then if you have empathy, then doesn't that mean you take, and then by extension, then all of us have responsibility for others. Isn't that in the Bible? Aren't we supposed to be our brother's keeper or sister's keeper? And if that's the case, then if government is all of us, then shouldn't we all act in a Christian way and be each other's keeper? Wow. I mean, somebody should do a sermon like that.
You know, the one thing, we keep coming back to this phrase, living wage, living wage, living wage.
I'm going to get
instead
water.
of Christian, ecumenical way.
There you go. Go ahead, Living.
Living wage is, it's almost a euphemism, and it may be code for low income in many people's minds. If workers are profit creators, they deserve a living wage and a share of the profit they generate, which does two things. They get paid for their work, and if their work is profitable, it's profitable for them as well as the owners. That has an appeal to business people, because they know darn well that when you do
they
your
don't
balance
really
sheet,
profit.
and you look at a profit and loss statement, that profit and loss statement is after all expenses.
Mm-hmm.
We have not gross profit, but net profit, and net profit is what I get my bonus from. And it ought to be what the profit creators get their bonuses from as well. Because living wage implies minimum wage in some ways.
See, okay.
And I don't know anybody who goes to a company and says, I really want to go here and work to make a living wage. They go there to make the best wage they can get. That's how they choose.
I think conservatives, I think that, I would say that living wage is a contested value or a contested phrase.
Extremely.
And I think therefore it needs to be defined just like we need to define freedom. I mean a living wage should mean that you can have a decent house, vacation every year to enjoy time off. You should have, some aspect of retirement to provide the freedoms that FDR talked about. Freedom from want, fear, hunger. I mean, not just, I think that's it's a very important matter of semantics, but I think it's in terms that we need to start defining. And again, progressives do a terrible job of defining living wage because they talk about it in terms of a single issue, the minimum wage. Why are they talking about a minimum wage? Let's make it about a living wage and then define what that living wage means. Freedom to have a nice house for you and your family if you have a family or if you have dogs or cats. Freedom to, enjoy nature around you. Freedom to retire when you've spent your life working for a company creating profit. I mean, all these things should be part of what a living wage discussion is.
Quality of life.
Right, it comes down to quality of life, clearly.
Because I would just say fair wage and a share of the profits they generate, and get away from that living wage.
Here's the problem
We fought the living wage issue for 20 years in Minnesota. And with nonprofit organizations going to the legislature and proving this and proving that, and showing this and showing that, and it was a non-starter, and it's still a non-starter. And if you look at what's been done with the minimum wage has become a way to keep wages at a minimum.
Right, that's what I'm saying, that we need to
So we
redefine.
we don't win anything by fighting about minimum wage either.
No,
I think it's just a fair wage and a fair share of the profits we generate.
okay. The one problem with,
You reframe.
the one problem with just saying fair wage is then, well, whose definition of fair is that?
The problem.
Yeah,
I mean, when you're talking about living,
Problem.
I have a hard time thinking that the majority of people would view living wage as minimum wage.
Well, the thing is, living wage gave them the ability to say one wage for dependent children or students, and one wage for people who depend on this for their family. That's what living wage gave
I
them.
really like the profit creator, or we have to be able to. I think in the large view of things, we have to stick with the profit creators. We need workers deserve a share of the profits from the company they're making, from the business, that they're working for.
Well,
That big frame there, and when you get to because you can't really use that on the public side, so the
Right.
public workers, the public servants, their wages should be geared towards prevailing profit making on the other side.
Right.
If people, getting a fair share of profits on well-run businesses are making this in this area, then public servants in this area should be making a comparable.
Right, because they're providing necessary resources
Yeah,
to
prevailing
So-
wages in this area are making this because of the public system we have here.
Right.
Public people should be making
Right.
an equivalent.
I mean, Senator Weinhaut,
In the big view, we should probably should stay away from minimum or
Senator Weinhaut talks about this like synergistic relationship between the public and the private. And that's another really good message, because there's a connection and people don't understand it. I mean, in terms of, look, I mean, living wage is, yes, it's contested. So, but why do we yield the high ground? Why do we yield the moral ground? Why can't we reclaim the moral ground on it and define a living wage as what it should be? Quality of life,
Standard of living,
I mean,
certain standards.
some level to enjoy life, the fruits of your labor, that kind of thing?
But you know what the businessmen are gonna say?
I'm gonna have
You're
to
not
intervene
taking
here.
any
We need
risks.
to take a pause. I need to change the battery. Thank you.
We have a lot more to go. Good.
No.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
When you embed
So-
something in your neurons,
yeah,
you're talking about embedding a qualitative moral structure, moral value. You're not talking about discriminating between how profits are distributed on a balance sheet at the end of a fiscal year.
right, and the qualitative provides the necessary context for the quantitative.
Right, so the thing is that all of this discussion that we've had about how the profits are distributed and whether they are or not they are distributed and what the ratios and rules are, that never gets into your neuronal structure.
Sure it does.
How?
Well, because I mean, your brain isn't, I mean, it's in groupings, and you have translational neural pathways across regions that connect the qualitative and quantitative information that provide the full picture of what you are consciously processing.
My son got his degree cum laude in neuroscience at UIC last year.
Oh.
I'm glad to learn what he's been learning.
I have some books I can
Seems to
get.
me that if we just say workers are profit creators, like you taught us very well, and that workers deserve a portion of the profit that they have created, and that public sector servants are, public servants, deserve to be, because they have helped the private sector make these profits
Mhm.
deserve, you know, to be paid at similar wages.
Fairly.
That
Mhm.
takes, that big picture, you're done.
Yeah,
You're done.
but-
You framed it as what workers deserve and what they're earning for the private sector, you're done. The other stuff, you know, how you manage it and how you calculate it, let legislators do that. Don't worry about that. The
Well,
big picture is what we're.
It shifts the focus of the system from a system where the pursuit of profit is primary over everything else and is actually a moral dictum to something that has systemic effect more broadly.
Well, there's the pursuit of profit and the distribution of profit.
Yes.
Could that be, are those alternatives on the same moral plane?
Well, sure they are.
Okay.
They can be, sure.
So we could frame it as a frame of greed versus distribution, or
I would say greed.
Or is it a personal personality versus equity?
I would say greed versus responsibility,
Okay.
It's fairness. It's
because
getting a portion of
the
the profits that you.
We could put that on a
created
billboard,
is
is what
fairness.
I'm getting at. You know, we could put that either or on a billboard.
Yep.
And initiate the message.
Yep. We're just
I think that's
about
what we're trying to do, is come up with ways to do that.
Yep. Well, that's why we're on the 16th. We're
Okay.
moving further ahead here. So to kind of summarize, so think of the conservative dominance we've been talking about as an epidemic. Because I like to think of it as a cognitive epidemic. Okay, we know that progressive ideas and vision are dying. They're fading from public discourse. And it's happening globally. Can anybody guess what the darker shaded areas are?
The Empire Strikes Back.
So the darker the color, the higher percentage rate of what?
The difference between the wealthy.
No?
Capital.
Income inequality.
I was on the webinar, so.
Gun ownership.
Oh, look at, that's, yeah, that's.
But when you think of it in terms, we talked about it propagating fear because you have this idea of self-reliance. You have to be independent. You're not part of a responsible community, or, you know, if you have, don't you want a gun to protect yourself? Think about that. So this idea of cognitive framing, it's literally a cognitive vaccine, because after this now you're aware of what used to be unconscious. So the unconscious that's happening around you is now conscious, and I guarantee you're never going to read the newspaper the same way again. And your brains are already changing. New neural pathways, so it's going to help fight Alzheimer's because you are exercising new neural pathways. Okay? And we talked about this earlier when John brought up this idea that, you know, if you only give the measles vaccine to 10% of the population, it's not going to work, right? So the idea is, if we start getting large population vaccinated, that's actually a real vaccine efficacy. Polio, rubella, measles. If you start to get large, and again, if you just start evoking empathy in people, getting them to evoke this idea that, oh, you do have a responsibility for others. Like one of the great, like out in sand mining country, they went through this whole thing about people saying, oh, it's their land. If they want to sell their land to a sand mine, why shouldn't we just let them? Right? Let them make the money, fine. And I said, well, then ask them, can you just dump your garbage in your neighbor's backyard? Can you, yeah, I mean, can you do anything you want with your property? You know, could you dig a manure pit in your backyard? And they're like, no, why not? Well, because that would hurt my property value.
Actually, under current law, you can put a pit in your backyard. It's a secondary operation, and your neighbors can do nothing, nor can your township or your county, because it is totally controlled by state legislation, which makes it illegal to deny a permit for your waste pit.
You have to have you have to be, for, yes, you're right. But the zoning for that,
You cannot zone it out.
no, you can't, no, because it's already been designated as whatever it is, ag commercial.
A1.
Right, A1, and they're already operating under that permit for that, right. I understand that. I'm saying in a private residential area, you could not put a manure pit next door to your neighbor. Again, it's a metaphorical argument, but it gets them to connect this idea.
As soon as manure runs in somebody's town and screws up their well water,
That's-
they're all screaming when they find out where it's coming from.
Well, that's what's happening in Kiwanis.
And that's what's happening.
It's all over.
Right. But so the idea, though, is to
You can't
create
your
empathy.
stuff.
Right. The idea is to create empathy for people. And don't don't do it on an issue by issue. Do it broadly first and then talk about the issue. So real quick, this is important. Okay. This is important. You hear a lot about framing. I mean, just Google, framing and messaging. All sorts of stuff comes up. There's a lot of people that say that they're framing, that say they're doing values-based messaging, that it's got nothing to do with the cognitive framing. Lots of different stuff out there. I mean, it's more than clever wordplay. We've talked about that. It's deeper. Here's some examples. This is NEA member recommended core message for 2015. We should invest in public education. That's great. Prepare all kids with the skills they need for 21st century jobs.
Critical thinking.
No, what they should say is, so kids learn what's possible in life.
Right.
Simple. So this is the Frameworks Institute is in Boston. It's very well funded. You can join the Frameworks Institute for $150 a year, which then gives you access to all their webinars, which you can then pay $100 a piece for. Here's what they recommend for helping immigration issue experts change the public conversation. Representing 1/5 of all low-wage workers in the United States, undocumented immigrants are a crucial part of our economic engine. Talk about conservative economic frame, right? Those aren't people. I mean, even metaphorically, they're talking about them as a cog in an economic engine.
They're worker units.
That's
And low wage.
right. Thank you. Yes, they evoke the idea of low wage. Talk about, low wage workers. I mean, terrible. Just terrible. Here's one more local, Wisconsin Voices. This is from the convening. This was actually from a presentation called Winning the Debate, Using Values-Based Messaging to Rebuild and Rebrand the Progressive Movement. Starting in 2014, we will live in an America where everyone has the freedom to control their own healthcare decisions no matter what. Do you want to know how much they got paid to come up with that?
Yeah, I would.
That specific convening, they probably got a $25,000 grant to hold that convening. You see the problem. They're talking about personal freedom, personal liberty, and again, healthcare as a market commodity that you choose. Really? Try living without healthcare.
I'm glad
can't
you're
even live
talking
with
about it this way with, having read some Lake on myself, rather than you doing that to us and my head exploding.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
So,
Get us on the right
okay, so this is we have 2 minutes left. This is my ad. So I developed this thing that I call Authentic Framing for the Future. I have a website. It's frame4future.com. Obviously, I've worked for the last 4 years with George Lakoff, developing a way to take current cognitive research and apply it to communities, to campaigns, to issues, things like this. The Forward Institute is an important part of this. The Forward Institute is a 501c3. So thus, since I'm here at a party thing, that's a no-no. But which is why I've developed something that is, there's no wall with politics and partisan work, because I thought there was a need for it outside of the 501c3 realm. So basically, if you go to the website, I've got some lit up here. I'm hosting webinars every month. Something that I call thinking points. I don't like talking points because, as we talk, there's no point in me telling you what to say, because there's no magic bullet phrase. There's values, there's ideas, there's frames, but we won't have good metaphors and good slogans like conservatives until a bunch of us have been doing this, because it comes out of authentic, heartfelt values. I mean, this, public schools are the heart of the community is a great message, because it came out of some people that were authentically trying to come up with a message, which we will do in 2 weeks. And then I also have a discussion forum. There is a subscription price if you want to do everything for a year. It's super inexpensive compared to a cup of coffee. So I'll leave it at that, because I don't want to be like all infomercial on you. All right, so that's the ad. That's it. So what's important? This is what I want you to think about for 2 weeks from now. Okay, this is kind of homework over 2 weeks, now that you've had the foundation. Number one, what are the values, the progressive values that unify everyone across issues within either your organization, your community, your congressional district, whatever it is you're working in?
Community.
Yep. So that's the values, right? And then how do those values evoke the progressive frame? The progressive frame based on empathy, responsibility, across issues. And think outside of your comfort zone. If you work on education, think in terms of labor unions and economics and the environment. Think outside of your comfort zone. And what are some ways that you can effectively communicate those values, which would then activate the progressive frame and amplify progressive values, because that's what we want to do. We want messaging to start happening that evokes the progressive frame all the time to get those mirror neurons working. Oh, sorry. You're gonna get this. You'll get this PowerPoint. Okay, so you have it for reference. Neil deGrasse Tyson is awesome. He says this, and he's not a cognitive scientist, linguist, or anything, but he gets it. One of the biggest problems with the world today is that we have large groups of people who will accept whatever they hear on the grapevine just because it suits their worldview, which is really true. So what we need to do is provide them a worldview that is actually going to help them and their communities more, instead of being afraid all the time. Any last questions before? Wow. Thank you. Oh, and thanks to Mary and Ann, and for the wonderful food. Wow. That was